The first set of principles that we are going to see, remember our list of Agile principles, are all organizational. We'll cover four of them in this segment. Put the customer at the center, accept change, let the team self-organize, and maintain a sustainable pace. The first one is to put the customer at the center. There's a very strong emphasis in Agile methods on making sure that customers are involved, not just at the beginning and at the end, as in some traditional developments where you write requirements with users, with customers at the beginning, and then you present the result to them. In Agile methods, you're supposed to involve customers throughout to make sure at every instant that you're building the system that they actually want, not just building the system right, but building the right system. Here, for example, is Kanban. You will get better results with real customers. They are those whom you are trying to please. No customer at all or a proxy for a real customer, by which he means, for example, a requirements document, leads to waste as you develop features that are not going to be used, specify tests that do not reflect the real acceptance criteria important to customers, and you lose the chance to build real relationships between the people with the most diverse perspective of the project. And so there are two solutions to address this issue, the extreme programming solution and the Scrum solution. In XP, the idea is to have an embedded customer who is a member of the team. So you take a customer away from his or her organization. He or she is an expert in the application domain, and you put them in the project along with the developers. I must say that in practice that doesn't work very well because it's difficult to find such people, and even if you find one, he is probably not going to be representative of all users. Typically, what characterizes customers is that they have diverse perspectives. The various people involved in the customer organization have diverse perspectives. So if you find just one, there is a serious risk that you're going to be biased. Scrum replaces this idea with a different one, the notion of product owner. So this is different because the product owner is officially authorized to commit the organization. The role of the product owner takes away part of the traditional role of the manager. We've seen that in Agile methods, many of the roles of a manager are given to other actors, and this is one of them. One of the things that managers traditionally do is to decide after an iteration of the development whether it's acceptable or not. Well, this is the task of the product owner, who is entitled to commit the customer organization for this kind of decision. And I would say in practice this works better than the embedded customer of XP because of this official responsibility and commitment. What is common to both approaches, extreme programming and Scrum, is the importance of involving customer representatives at every step. Now, it's important to note, to take a bit of distance from these Agile techniques, that customer involvement is a useful complement to requirements, but not a replacement. You still need to express, and preferably in writing, what the system should do, and of course to involve customers in the definition of whether that description of the requirements is correct or not. Second principle, accept change. As we've seen in the Agile Manifesto, the formula is that we welcome change, but in fact this is a bit of an exaggeration. Now, this is not a new idea. In standard software engineering textbooks, there's a lot of emphasis on a quality of software known as extendability. That is to say, the ability of a software system to be changed in response to changing requirements. One of the techniques that has been most useful in supporting extendability has been object technology, object-oriented development. Interestingly, the Agile literature takes a somewhat haughty view of object-oriented development and often criticizes it. For example, Mary Popenick writes, while in theory object-oriented development produces code that is easy to change, in practice object-oriented systems can be as difficult to change as the notion of supporting change is not new in software engineering. In fact, every software engineering textbook talks about extendability, which is one of the important qualities of software systems, the ability to be changed easily in response to changing user requirements. One of the best techniques that is known to achieve extendability is object technology, particularly object-oriented programming. In fact, that is one of the main claims to fame of object technology and one of the reasons for its success. Interestingly, while the Agile literature promotes change, that is to say extendability, it tends to take a somewhat contemptuous view of object technology. For example, here in this citation by Mary Poppendieck, while in theory object-oriented development produces code that is easy to change, in practice object-oriented systems can be as difficult to change as any other, especially when information hiding is not deeply understood and effectively used. Well, yes, certainly any approach which is applied by people who do not understand it and do not use it effectively is not going to be indeed very effective. But that doesn't say very much, and it's somewhat surprising to see that while on the one hand Agile methods promote the abstract idea of extendability, of welcoming change, in practice they fall completely short of proposing actual techniques for achieving it. And I would say that in practice object technology, in spite of all the unfounded criticism, unjustified criticism, is still the best known technique for achieving extendability. The third principle, again an organizational principle, is let the team self-organize. So the traditional view here is that you have a manager, and one of the main tasks of the manager is to tell workers to do their job, to assign tasks on a day-to-day basis. In the Agile view, this is no longer the responsibility of the manager to the extent there even is a manager. Instead, the team is self-organized, and the members of the team collectively decide on task assignments. And the role of the manager there is to listen to the developers, to explain what can be done, to coach, to mentor, to encourage progress, to help catch errors, to remove impediments. We will come back to this notion of impediment. An impediment is an obstacle, and it's a notion that plays an important role in Scrum. It's an important part of the tasks of the Scrum Master, the coach, to remove the impediments. We'll come back to that. The manager or the leader is here to provide support and help in difficult situations and to make sure that skepticism does not ruin the team's spirit. But the team chooses its own commitments and has permission to talk to customers. This idea is quite central in Agile methods. It reminds us perhaps of some orchestras that are self-organized, the most famous of which is the imusici. But we all can also note, if we take this analogy, that such ensembles are really a minority and that most orchestras still have a manager. Now, the goal of self-organization was well captured by this blog poster cited here. The most important aspect is to put the management of the project where it belongs, on the backs of the people doing the work. On the other hand, if you look through the small print, you'll realize that someone like Ken Schwaber, for example, one of the creators of Scrum, explains that it's not completely self-organization. That is still a lot of control, and in particular, subtle control. And I must say, this kind of comment makes me cringe a little bit, because if I'm controlled, I'd rather be controlled explicitly rather than subtly, and perhaps it's better to have a manager than to have the impressions of self-organization and someone pulling the strings in backstage. So here, this is one of the areas where Agile methods provide some important ideas, but we shouldn't be too strict and too dogmatic. In some cases, you will have teams that can self-organize, like imusici. In others, a traditional manager is required. The fourth principle, and the last one we'll see in this segment, is maintain a sustainable pace. Here the ideas go back to these two books shown here, one by Ed Jordan criticizing the notion of death march. The death march is the kind of extreme pressure put on programmers typically to meet a deadline. And there's also another famous book by DeMarco and Lister, Peopleware, with two editions explaining how programmers actually work, and explaining in particular that programmers need to have some peace in order, so some quiet and some respect in order to do a good job. So here, as explained, for example, in XP and Scrum in Crystal, the emphasis is that people perform best if they are not overstressed. So there is this emphasis on not forcing people to work more than 40 hours or whatever the legal limit is in a given country. And if there is overtime or weekend work, which can always happen, it should not happen regularly and should be compensated by some free time in the next week. So this is part of a general approach which promotes frequent code merge, always maintaining an executable test-covered high quality code so that programmers can be proud of their achievements. Constant refactoring, we'll talk about refactoring in more detail. Refactoring means improving the code and the design, and a collaborative style of working and constant testing. So what we've seen in this second segment of our principles lecture is a number of principles: put the customer at the center, accept change, let the team self-organize, maintain a sustainable pace. We've also seen some criticism that or limitations that can be expressed about these principles, and of course we have a number of other principles complementing these, which we're going to cover in the next segments of this lecture.